Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, you probably won't remember much about the substance of Theresa May's conference speech last year, but you probably will remember the protester handing her a P45 and that awful coughing fit. But amid the coughs, she did promise to put housing centre stage of her premiership. Well, today she has been attempting to do just that, unveiling new plans to boost home building. Here she is, making a cough-free speech a little earlier.
The impact of rising prices goes beyond the simple division between housing haves and have-nots. This crisis of unaffordability is also creating a crisis of almost literal social immobility. Think of the skilled, experienced worker who is offered a promotion but can't afford to take it up because it would mean moving to a town or city where he can't afford to live. Think of the talented young woman from a working-class background who can't afford to take an entry-level professional job because she wouldn't be able to live nearby. It's not so hard to accept that door-opening internship in London if your parents own a large house in central London.
Now, we'll hear from the Housing Minister, Dominic Raab, in just a moment. But first of all, let's speak to Hilary Newport from the Campaign to Protect Rural England. She is the director of the group's Kent branch. Welcome to the programme. Theresa May has been speaking about a crisis in affordability in housing that she says is also creating a crisis of almost literal social immobility in the country. What's wrong with this government wanting to build more houses to address that?
Nothing's wrong. Mrs May is absolutely correct. The crisis is one of affordability rather than availability. And what we're keen to see is proper policies that actually make homes genuinely affordable for people.
Right, so what would you like her to actually propose?
I think we really need to think very hard about returning to social housing, because it's impossible for people to afford to get on the property ladder in London or in the South East. And we need to address some proper social solutions that are going to give people a decent place to live.
But does it make it difficult if there are restrictions being put on the government, or attempts to put restrictions on the government, as to where they can build these hundreds of thousands of new homes that they're promising?
Certainly, the modifications to the new National Planning Policy Framework are suggesting that we need to pack far more homes into the already overheated South East and London. And I think that that's a false it's a false hope. Simply building more and more houses in places that are already overstretched isn't going to bring down affordability. What we need is some proper social policies that help people. Right,
and you know that will be an accusation then levelled at you of NIMBYism, that you don't want them built in parts of the country, as you have said, in the South East. Where would you support a big house building programme?
We'd certainly support measures that will, well, we talk about the Northern Powerhouse, but the modifications to the National Planning Policy Framework would actually see fewer homes being built in parts of the North East and North West, where I would argue that economic growth is desperately needed.
Right, but of course at the moment lots of the jobs are down in the south and around the home counties. Will you support a big house building programme there of the sort of affordability that you talked about?
We certainly accept that some greenfield sites have to be delivered, have to be handed over for housing delivery, but certainly we want proper planning policies that allow local planning authorities to actually direct development to where it will do the most good and the least harm.
Or will that
just stall? That's very hard.
Or will that just stall the process?
I don't believe it will stall the process, but developers need to be incentivised to provide the housing that people actually need, rather than simply catering for market demand. And
are you reassured that the government is not going to tear up the green belt?
It's difficult to see how that can properly be enshrined when you look at a district like Sevenoaks, which has got astonishingly high housing targets, and it's almost all Greenbelt or AONB or both. So it will be very hard to deliver those kinds of targets, and something has to give, either the number of houses that they're being forced to build or the Greenbelt, I'm afraid, and that's simply impossible to reconcile at the moment.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, we can discuss this now with the Housing Minister, Dominic Raab. Welcome to the programme. You heard there that this is about affordability, not availability. What do you say to that?
Well, I agree it's about both, but the problem for the campaign for the protection of rural England is that social housing is at its highest demand in London and the South East as well, and therefore if they don't want us to build there, we're caught in a catch-22 of their own making. But actually, look, what we're going to do is give local authorities more tools to do the box. That's what the change of the National Planning Policy Framework will do. For example, to build up a story or two, mused houses, terraced streets, and we're going to create more freedom for them. But at the end of the day, neither at council level nor at national government level can we duck the challenges to build the homes for the future.
Right, but Theresa May returned to her theme actually with her Brexit speech on Friday about the just about managing and the implication of the burning injustices that she wants to do something about. Why has it taken so long to get to grips with this issue?
Well, look, it's complicated because you've got central government, local authorities, and you've also got the whole business community and the issue of the developers. Every one of those has got a role to play. But if you look at home ownership, it declined 2003 to 2013, 2014, stabilised since. And if you look at the last year, we got new homes delivered up to 217,000. That's the highest level in all but one of the last 30 years.
From a very, very low bar.
You're absolutely right. So we're restless to do even more. Planning reform, important part of that, but so are the other things. Release of public sector land, Homes Infrastructure Fund.
Right, but why haven't you built more affordable homes in the last 2 years? If Theresa May keeps talking about people who are struggling and the just about managing, why has there been absolutely no progress in terms of building more affordable homes?
Well, so, for example, if you look at the last 7 years, we've seen more affordable homes delivered than the previous 7 years.
Right, hang on a second. Let's just have a look at the figures. The figures of new affordable homes in 09-10 was 58,290, and it has fallen to 41,530. So that is a drop.
Yes, but if you're looking at if you're looking over a longer term picture,
well, I'm not.
7 years. Well, I'm suggesting you should.
Well,
so you
would suggest that, but actually the figures have come down. In 14-15, there were 66,000, yes, and now they've come down to 41,530.
I totally accept we've got to do more, but frankly, whether you're talking about homes overall or affordable homes, the key thing is to build up supply and have more homes coming onto the market, whether it's for ownership, co-ownership, or rent, or social rent. And that's why planning reform is one very important piece of that jigsaw.
Right, OK, you've talked about affordable homes and you say overall that there have been more homes built. What about council homes? If we're talking about affordability and you say that's absolutely critical, how many council homes have been built in the last year?
I'm not sure what the figure will be for the year alone because I tend to look at the affordable homes over a longer term picture in the way I described.
Right, well, new homes for social rent in 16-17 were 5,380. In 2009 and 2010, they were 33,490. That is a drop of over 80%.
And we've got to do better. And one of the that
is.
So let me give you the answer. So one of the reasons why we've raised the borrowing cap by £1 billion for local authorities. So yes, we can build more homes through the local authorities. There's no one single thing that's going to do this. It's about pressure on local authorities, putting a bit more of a squeeze on developers, and yes, looking at the national planning framework and making sure the tools are there for developers and local authorities to do the job.
But that's not the answer, is it? There's been no action. There have been lots and lots of words from Theresa May and lots of rhetoric. But when we try and match that rhetoric with action, you say more can be done. Absolutely more can be done. But at the moment, the direction of travel has been in totally the wrong direction.
I don't think that's remotely fair.
Sorry, on new homes for social rent, we're talking about people who are just about managing.
That's not the whole picture, is it?
Well, which homes could they afford?
So, for example, first-time buyers, we've got the highest number of first-time buyers since the financial crash. A really important statistic.
Is that for the just about managing? The people who are just scraping by?
Well, these are people that weren't getting on the housing ladder before. But you're right, we've got to do more. Planning reform's important for that. Help to Buy is getting criticised, but actually it's helped a lot of the people that wouldn't have got a chance to get on the housing ladder. Release of public sector land. All of these, and cutting stamp duty for first-time buyers is an important thing to do. So there's not one single lever. We've got to yank about half a dozen levers to get home building up, about 20 or 30% harder. Planning reform today will deliver that.
Would you agree that a burning injustice is an 86% drop in the number of affordable homes that have been built?
look, I don't think there's any one statistic that does it justice, but if you're making the point that we need to build not just more homes, but more affordable homes for the key workers, the nurses, the teachers, for those in the private sector working extra shift, I absolutely agree. That's why we're straining it a bit to do more. And the planning reforms, I know they're very techie, people don't like to get into the detail of it, but we're giving local authorities greater tools to do the job. And we're also picking a bit more of a squeeze on them and saying, look, we can't duck this anymore.
Right, and what is the squeeze? Will you put sanctions on councils who don't meet targets?
So what the National Planning Policy Framework changes today set out is a phased approach to putting the squeeze on local authorities who, let's put it like this, abdicate their responsibility to either provide the housing supply or get the homes built when it's very clear what the homes their community need are. And at the same time, it's not all one-way traffic. We are also putting £5 billion through the Homes Infrastructure Fund in providing the roads, the utilities, the schools, the clinics, so that we don't just build more homes, but we build up stronger communities as well.
Right, all right. You've set out a whole set of proposals, and I have put to you some stark figures that don't show that there's been improvement on affordable homes and on homes for social rent. But even in the conference speech last year by Theresa May, which was going to be billed as a sort of housing revolution, the promise there was only 5,000 more homes, affordable homes and homes for social rent every year for 5 years. Is that enough?
Well, I think our target is to get up to 300,000 new homes built.
That's new homes. I'm talking about affordable homes and social rent.
Yes, but I don't accept I think that dividing it up is not right, because actually...
But the government is the one that's saying that they're the people that you want to help.
Yes, but Joe, just a sec. If you get up those numbers of new homes delivered to that figure of 300,000, which we said by the mid-2020s, it is a long-term plan. No one said it was going to happen overnight. You bring the affordability down for the nurse, for the teacher, for the guy, the family working extra shifts to try and settle down and get their foot on the housing ladder.
Right. Heather Wheeler, who is the new Minister for Homelessness, has said she'll resign if the figures for the number of rough sleepers gets worse. Will you do the same, give the same assurance if targets aren't met?
Look, I'm putting my heart and soul into getting the new homes delivered. I'm not going to make this all about my reputation or what I'm doing, but what I can tell you is that on every one of those levers, Sajid Javid, the Secretary of State, myself and the Prime Minister will be yanking those levers about 20 to 30% harder to get more homes built. And that's not just the way we provide the homes Britain needs, but we make them more affordable for precisely the people you're talking about, Joe.
Right, but that is a clear assurance from this new minister, and she's putting her reputation on the line on an issue that your government has said is going to be absolutely critical. Theresa May said it is going to be at the forefront, at centre stage. You are there on the front line as the housing minister.
The Prime Minister has already made very clear that I'll be for the high jump unless we get more homes built, so don't worry about anything that I say. We're absolutely clear and we're committed, and actually the fact that we've got Heather Wheeler, an extra housing minister, dealing with this crucially important issue of rough sleeping shows that commitment.
Right, and it shows that commitment because, again, the number of rough sleepers has tripled between 2010 and 2017, from 1,768 to 4,751. It is shameful.
Oh, well, look, we've got to do much, much better. I've been and volunteered at Anchor House, a homeless charity in Newham. I've seen how complicated it is, because a lot of the people who find themselves in that awful position, the lack of a roof over their head is the symptom, not the cause. There are complex social issues. Alex will know for the Centre for Social Justice. But you're right, we've got to do better. Right.
The Tory councillor who chairs the Local Government Association, Gary Porter, said on Twitter, the answer is not another planning law shake-up, but to let councils build homes themselves. Do you agree with him?
I can fully sign up to the package that's been announced today. And one of the things that comes up time and time again from young constituents of mine out in Essex, from their parents or grandparents, they want to see more housing made available and they want to see it put up in a sustainable way. And it's something that has been close to my heart for a while. I was very pleased to hear Sajid Javid talk about it over the weekend, the creation of new towns and new villages that we're going to see on this varsity line between Oxford and Cambridge, which enables government to put the infrastructure in, put the schools in, put the roads in, make sure the clinics are there. That is a very positive vision for what housing should be in the next phase.
Can you sign up to it too?
Well, what we've got is a triple crisis. We've got a homelessness crisis with the £28 million fund.
I've done that with Dominic Raab, but can you sign up to the proposals that have been announced today and the commitment that's being made to building more homes?
My question is, where is the underpinning investment coming from? What my concern is about about changes that this government has made, for example, on zero-carbon homes. These homes are going to be around for the next 70 to 100 years, and yet they are not being future-proofed for climate change. Whereas the issues on sustainable urban drainage, we've got for homes across the country that are without water because of the leaks. We've got to actually look at this, and the government has got rid of the decontamination grant to clear up brownfield sites.
But do you support the pledge to build more homes? I mean,
course,
on new homes, it has gone to 217,350, and the last time it was at that level was back in 07-08.
Exactly, just before the financial crisis. Everybody wants to get house building up, home ownership up and homelessness down. The question is, who's the party that you trust on this? The Tories with their broken record of broken promises on this.
Well, your record on housing isn't great. We haven't got time to do Labour's record on housing, but it wasn't very good either.
In every year, we voted...
Only 75,000 in 2008.
We built more houses. I didn't interrupt you.
Alex, let her
I didn't
finish.
interrupt you. We built more houses in every year of a Labour government than in any of the first 5 years of your government. And you're only now coming to this, and there is a collapse in the houses being built for social rented housing. Council spending £1 billion a year in temporary accommodation for homeless families.
You better have a response to that before I let you go. What do you say to Mary Cray?
Well, look, if you've got a shadow Labour minister in John Healey who says that home ownership isn't that important, and a Labour leader who thinks all property is theft, they voted against our stamp duty cut for first-time buyers. But frankly, no one gives a monkeys about what the tit-for-tat between Mary and I. It is about yanking all of those levers to build the homes we need, but crucially, which I think we all agree on, getting the affordability down for the key workers, for the people working on lower middle incomes.
Dominic Raab, thank you.
The Prime Minister is urging developers to up their game and build more homes in England. Theresa May said for young people, owning a property is now largely unaffordable without the bank of mum and dad. She said changes to planning rules, which would penalise developers who delay building on their land, should help to deal with the shortage of properties. But Labour described the measures as feeble. Here's our Home Editor, Mark Easton.
The Prime Minister donned the high vis today, determined to show she's tackling what she describes as a national housing crisis. But Theresa May is not the first senior Tory to get her shoes muddy on a building site. Remember him? And him? And him? Today the PM had the big builders and developers in her sights, blaming some of them for putting profit before their patriotic duty to restore the dream of home ownership.
The bonuses paid to the heads of some of our biggest developers are based not on the number of homes they build, but on their profits or share price. I expect developers to do their duty for Britain and build the homes our country needs.
Some builders will tell you their first responsibility is to their shareholders. And it is unusual for a Conservative Prime Minister to tell private companies she's considering changing the rules to make it more difficult for them to make a profit.
Among possible planning reforms is the idea that developers with a reputation for not building homes fast enough might be denied planning permission by councils.
Not only do house builders make returns to their shareholders, we're also cross-subsidising almost half of the affordable housing in this country every single year. So we're doing the job of government.
For Conservatives, home ownership is central to their vision for housing. The Prime Minister today said that she met young voters at the last election angry at being unable to get on the ladder. But 24-year-old Tessa says focusing on ownership is missing the point.
I don't even think about being able to afford something like that because the prices are so high anyway, so I don't know how I'd get the deposit together in order to buy one, even if it was available.
But Mrs May also wants to keep the Conservative core vote on side.
Oh, hello. Do you know about Fair Oaks New Town?
People like these residents in True Blue Surrey, who are supported by their MP, Environment Secretary Michael Gove, in their opposition to a new garden village. Planning reform worries these campaigners.
I think this is going to be a backward step, and we are really worried that these sort of developments, which are really damaging to the environment and the community as a whole, will be pushed forward against the people's wishes.
Some Conservatives want the Treasury to relax borrowing rules so councils and housing associations can build many more genuinely affordable homes. Others see the priority as protecting England's precious green landscape. It's a surprise, perhaps, the Prime Minister didn't think it wise to wear a hard hat today. Mark Easton, BBC News.
Now, Theresa May has declared she's taking personal charge of shaking up the country's planning laws as she outlined the government's latest plans to tackle the national housing crisis. The Prime Minister pledged to build the right homes in the right places, more affordable homes, whilst protecting the Greenbelt, to achieve what she called the dream of home ownership.
Talking to voters during last year's election campaign, it was clear that many people, particularly younger people, are angry about this. Angry that regardless of how hard they work, they won't be able to buy a place of their own. Angry when they're forced to hand more and more of their wages to a landlord to whom their home is simply a business asset. Angry that no matter how many sacrifices they make to save for a deposit, they'll never be able to compete with someone whose parents have released equity from their own home to help their children buy.
Mrs May also laid out a stark warning for alleged unscrupulous developers, promising to make it harder for those who sit on land and watch its value rise to get planning permission. Instead, she said they should do their duty to build homes. And she claimed she wasn't afraid to take on NIMBY councils, bringing in independent inspectors to make planning decisions for them if they drag their feet. But Shadow Housing Minister John Healey said there was nothing new in the plans and that would make a difference at all.
Well, the former planning minister and Conservative MP Nick Boles has in the past accused his own party of being far too timid on housing and planning reform. And he doesn't think the plans outlined by Theresa May today go far enough either. Nick Boles is calling for much bolder action to solve the housing crisis, but also, he says, to save the Conservative Party. Here's his take on today's speech.
The reason why we feel that the English countryside is so built up is because most of our experience of it is through journeys by car. It's only when you go by train that you realise that a tiny proportion of it is developed. Only 2 to 3% is actually built on.
We have built up over now 20 years or more a problem, and every year that it's gone on not being fully addressed means that the solution now has to be bolder to make up, as it were, for the backlog. And one of the most striking and depressing facts is that we have not built a substantial new settlement, a new garden city, a new town, even practically a new village for 30 or 40 years.
The Prime Minister's announced today that she wants to see 2 new garden towns built between Oxford and Cambridge. Now that's really encouraging, but it's doomed to fail unless we change the law.
Milton Keynes is a tiny village in the heart of North Buckinghamshire. At the moment, about 200 people live here, and it's basically a farming community. It's estimated that by the end of the century, about 250,000 people will live here in Milton Keynes.
In Milton Keynes, they were able to buy land at relatively cheap prices and use the money saved to invest in the infrastructure of a new city. That's what makes a place like Milton Keynes work. But today's plans don't deliver that.
It's sort of grown organically, but very, very quickly, into a very, very big place. And it's an incredibly popular place to live. People love Milton Keynes.
Here in Culham, outside Oxford, they're proposing a relatively small new settlement, and it's proving really contentious.
As far as you can see, here will be destined for a town, a housing, 360 degrees all the way around. Our council is pushing this forward like there's no tomorrow, like a bulldozer. So this huge area, 300 hectares of greenbelt, is going to be lost, and a town is going to be created on top of an ancient village with 170 houses.
This is the kind of opposition that has led Conservative councils to run shy of building enough houses in the countryside. But last year's election showed that failure to do so has a political cost.
The feeling I'm increasingly getting is that this isn't now just a social crisis for the country, but it's also potentially a political crisis for the Conservative Party and could well finish us off at the next election. Now, you've been as it were, living that at the last election. Yeah, what role do you think it played?
The difference between the 2015 election, where housing was a concern, but quite low down the list of concerns, to 2017, when it was in the top 2 or 3 issues, was really noticeable on the doorstep, and particularly amongst the under 40s, who were really concerned both about whether they could ever afford to buy a house and really the state of some of the housing that they were forced to live in. So it became a really big issue for them, and one that they really wanted to kick the government about. And there's no doubt it played a really significant part in me losing the election.
Politically, for the Conservative Party, this is an iceberg that is going to sink us. It damn near sank us in June of 2017. You know, we very nearly lost that election. And we will lose the next election, as sure as anything is in politics, if we don't start making real inroads into this. Because fundamentally, we have no message to people in their 30s and 40s to counteract their question, which is, we're doing everything you ask us to do, and we can't afford to get on the housing ladder, and what have you done about it?
Well, former Tory MP Nick Bowles is with me now, as is Caroline Lucas, leader of the Green Party and MP for Brighton Pavilion. So he's got some of the things which you're interested in, social housing and affordable, at least for lower affordable housing, you're interested. What about garden cities?
Let me say, first of all, that I welcome the fact that Nick is giving the government a bit of a shake, because we do have a massive housing crisis in this country. We need to go much further than the government's doing. I would say also a bit further than Nick is suggesting too. The first issue, if I can just quickly pick up on the definition of affordable. I mean, please, can we just put this one to bed? The idea that affordable should mean 80% of market rent is nothing less than obscene. For most people, 80% of market rent is nothing like affordable. So let's make sure that whatever we do build is genuinely affordable. And when it comes to...
Let me just see if Nick Bowles, and I defenestrated you by mistake, of course you are an MP, but what do you say to that? That affordable is a completely absurd concept, isn't it?
I agree. I mean, I think what we need to...
Shall we get rid of the word altogether?
Well, what we need to see built is genuinely affordable homes, which is roughly the same as what used to be called council homes or social homes. Now, I don't care what the term is, but we need to build many more of them, and that involves government actually borrowing money to get them built.
Agreement. Carry on.
And would you agree as well that local authorities should be able to absolutely borrow against their existing housing stock more than they can now and build those homes, and also just stop selling off the existing council homes and social housing? Since 1980, I think about 1.8 million social homes, council homes have been sold off. That, again, is an absurdity at the time when people on low incomes are really struggling to find homes.
So I agree with some of that. I agree that either councils or central government need to borrow money to build more council homes. I don't actually agree about not selling them off. I think the problem with selling them off is the fact that we haven't built any more to replace them.
Well, they never
If
have.
we are willing to borrow enough money, centrally and locally, to replenish the stock, I want everybody...
That's never
happened.
Never.
Well, at times it happened. In the 60s and 70s, before Right to Buy.
I mean,
but since Right to Buy, it hasn't happened. There's no reason why it couldn't happen. And if it did happen, you know, most people, when you ask them, want to own their own home. And I want to give them that opportunity.
But
we've got to then build enough social homes to replace them.
I want to see the evidence first that those homes are going to be replaced on a one-to-one basis. And right now, they are not. So
fair enough.
For the moment, let's kind of suspend our belief over whether that's going to happen. And I think as well, we need to tackle the rented sector, because frankly, if people can't afford to begin to save for a mortgage because they're paying so much in the private rented sector, then no matter what you do to the housing end of the equation, we're not going to help people get onto the housing ladder. I want to see people own their homes, but I also want to see them in the rented sector, not paying huge amounts of their income on that rent, and I want them to have more secure rentals as well.
In a word, agreed or not?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think we need to have more rental homes as well at a better price.
Where this green-blue coalition breaks.
Yeah, scary. Well, let me try on something a little bit more radical. What about about land value taxation. This is a way of bringing forward more land to be built on rather than allowing developers to sit on it waiting for it to accrue in speculative value. It was a proposal that Winston Churchill himself espoused back in 1909, I think.
Sure.
So what's your reaction to that one?
I'm afraid we're going to disappoint John. I've argued for this in a previous book, though I actually think the way to do it is what they did with Milton Keynes, is rather than having a tax, is to actually just give councils and development corporations the right to buy land at a reasonable value, not at the development land value, and then they can use the uplift to pay for the infrastructure. That's what got Milton Keynes.
You agree on
built.
that? I haven't got a big disagreement yet.
Well, I tell you where we will disagree,
Okay,
and that is on rent controls. I think there absolutely has to be a limit and indeed a cap on how much private rents can escalate, because right now we are seeing just a huge escalation.
No.
I don't agree
there you
with
go.
But they are absolutely horrendous.
That will reduce, I'm afraid, the number of new rented homes that are created, that are built. And that's, I think, is the most important thing, is to keep the supply up.
Well, that's always argued, but actually there's plenty of evidence from other European countries that that hasn't been the case. And of course, you don't slap on a rent cap tomorrow. It's got to come down over time. The Green Party is calling for a living rent commission to look at what kind of rent cap will be appropriate in different parts of the country.
What about garden cities?
Exactly. Can I ask Caroline, would you be up for, you know, we saw little Milton Keynes, tiny little village, 200 people, and it's now a city of 250,000 people.
Well,
would you be up for doing more of those in the English countryside?
Well, let me just say about Milton Keynes, because Milton Keynes and Tower Hamlets have, I think, about the same population, but Tower Hamlets takes up about 1/15 of the land area of Milton Keynes. So Milton Keynes may be very lovely people who live there, but they are very wasteful when it comes to land. So I think there may be, in some time, a role for some kind of new garden cities, but not yet. I don't think we should be incentivising them now. We should be incentivising people to build on brownfield. According to CPRE, there's a space capacity for around 1 million homes to be built on brownfield sites even now. So let's do that first.
Well, let's leave it there. I'm grateful to both of you. I think it's a score draw. Thank you very much.
I'm going to join the Green Party tomorrow. I'll bring my party membership.